All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT exam practice series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe for all of our video updates. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Squeaky Pete's Bar has a drink special that allows for free beer all afternoon for just $20. The manager of the bar wants to know how many beers the bar serves per hour while this special is active. What type of measurement should the manager use? So we have a measurement question, and with all measurement questions, you want to first decide what it is you're measuring. In this case, you have a bar that has a drink special that gives free beer all afternoon for $20. The manager wants to know how many beers per hour are served while the special is active. So the key here is this word per. Whenever we're measuring something per a unit of time, what type of measurement are we typically looking at? A, frequency. So frequency might tell us how many beers were served, period. But once we add this per hour, we've added a time component. What are we now measuring? B, latency. Latency is going to tell us the time in between SD and the first response. That's not going to tell us how many beers were served per hour. Duration. Duration might tell you how long the special went for, but we still would be missing this frequency part of how many beers. So if we're going to combine a frequency and a unit of time, we're going to want to use rate. Rate is frequency over time, and that's going to give us our beers per hour. And so whenever you see that wording of frequency per unit of time, you always want to think about rate. So what type of measurement should the manager use? D, rate. A child is taught to say, I want juice to request a drink during snack time. During lunch at home, the child independently uses phrases like, can I have juice and give me juice to request the same item, even though these phrases were not directly trained. What do these responses most demonstrate? So we're looking at responses, right? And whenever the question is asked, you want to immediately identify either the behavior, the response, the stimulus. What is the item of interest? Because there are questions where there is a lot of information given, and you can get easily caught up in things that don't necessarily matter. So what responses are we looking at? Well, we're looking at the responses that were not directly trained, such as, can I have juice and give me juice? And why are those important? Well, the child was initially taught to say, I want juice to request a drink. So initially, the child would want the juice and they would say, I want juice. Now, without teaching, they're using phrases like, can I have juice and give me juice? So what do we call it when we have multiple responses occurring in the presence of a stimulus? And typically those responses are not trained. A, maintenance. Well, since those responses were not trained, we're not going to consider this maintenance. Maintenance occurs after we teach something, then we stop teaching, and the behavior continues. So now we have response generalization and stimulus generalization. Well, response generalization is exactly what we're looking at. We have multiple responses occurring in the presence of a stimulus. Stimulus generalization is the opposite. You've got multiple or a single response occurring in the presence of multiple stimuli. So we're not looking at stimulus generalization, but rather response generalization. And finally, spontaneous recovery. Well, spontaneous recovery has to do with extinction, and we're not discussing extinction here. Good example of why fluency is so important. If you're fluent, then spontaneous recovery should not even be an option or something you're considering in this question. And so what do these responses most demonstrate? Going to be B, response generalization. A technician is implementing an extinction procedure to reduce a client's screaming behavior, which was previously reinforced with detention. During the first few sessions, the screaming temporarily increases in frequency and intensity. The technician feels unsure about how to proceed. What is the most appropriate way for the RBT to respond to the behavior? So let's think about this. How should this RBT respond to the behavior? Well, what do we know about the behavior? We know the tech is implementing extinction to reduce the screaming. During the sessions, what happened? The screaming temporarily increased in frequency and intensity. Is that something we would expect to happen if we put this behavior on extinction? Well, yes, right? What typically happens with extinction? Well, when we have a behavior and then we implement extinction, we expect that behavior to increase at first. What do we call that? We call that an extinction burst. And so if the technician is implementing extinction and there's a temporary increase in frequency and intensity, that is to be expected. In that case, how should the technician respond? A, stop the extinction procedure immediately to avoid escalating the behavior. That's not what you want to do at all, right? Extinction appears to be working. The last thing you want to do is now stop the extinction procedure as you're right in the middle of implementation. B, continue implementing the extinction procedure consistently while ensuring the client's safety. Yes, we see the behaviors increased in frequency and intensity, so we want to keep the client and everyone else safe, but we want to continue implementing extinction because so far it appears to be effective. C, begin using punishment to suppress the behavior quickly. Punishment is not part of an extinction procedure unless it's explicitly written into the plan. Nothing indicates that punishment should be used here, so punishment would not be a good option. D, reinforce the screaming behavior temporarily to reduce its intensity. That would likely be the worst thing to do. We're in the midst of extinction where we're withholding reinforcement for screaming. It got worse. The last thing we want to do is reinforce the behavior after it gets worse. So in this case, the RBT notices the extinction burst happening. The most appropriate way for them to respond would be continue implementing the extinction procedure consistently while ensuring the client's safety. A student frequently leaves their seat during math lessons to avoid completing difficult problems. The teacher implements an intervention where the student is allowed to skip one problem if they remain seated for the entire lesson. Over time, the student stays in their seat more often. What is maintaining the student's in-seat behavior? Okay, so we have a behavior question. Let's identify what we're looking at. We're looking at the student's in-seat behavior. And when we have a question that's asking about what's maintaining, well, we know it's a consequence question. What do we know so far about this in-seat behavior? We know the student was leaving their seat during math lessons. When the teacher implemented an intervention where the student could skip a problem, if they remained seated, the behavior increased. So when that behavior increases, we know it's going to be reinforcement, right? Reinforcement always increases behavior. So now we have to ask ourselves, was the consequence or did the consequence lead to the addition or removal of a stimulus? Well, the consequence for sitting the entire lesson was escape from a problem. The student was able to escape or avoid doing a problem. So that was a negative reinforcement. If we look at A, positive reinforcement, the student is staying in their seat more often. So it is increasing, but it isn't positive because the student is allowed to escape a problem. It's going to be B, negative reinforcement. The escape or the avoidance or the removal is negative. C, differential reinforcement. Differential reinforcement involves extinction. Nowhere in this question are we indicating extinction is taking place. So C or D won't work either because extinction does not appear to be present, or at least it's not mentioned. So since the student is allowed to escape the problem, which is then increasing that behavior, what is maintaining the student's in-seat behavior is B, negative reinforcement. Which of the following principles are the two key components of a good differential reinforcement intervention plan? We've used this question before. I think it's a good question to refresh on just what takes place in differential reinforcement. Remember, differential reinforcement is very important. It leads to discrimination. It leads to differentiation. We use differential reinforcement all the time. Our DROs, DRAs, DRIs. So if we're going to design a good differential reinforcement plan, what do we need? A, punishment and reinforcement. So punishment is not a key component of differential reinforcement. Can we use differential reinforcement and include punishment in the plan? You can, but it isn't a key component. B, extinction and punishment. Well, extinction is a key, but punishment is not. So if we look at C, extinction and reinforcement, that's what we're looking for. The two key components of differential reinforcement are extinction and reinforcement. Just consider if we had a square and a circle, and the SD is point to circle, well, I would reinforce circle and put this on extinction. That is a good example of differential reinforcement. So which of the following principles are key components of differential reinforcement? Well, it's going to be C, extinction and reinforcement. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.